The first bullet didn't scream. It hissed, a viper of lead slicing through the air before obliterating the flute of vintage Dom Perignon in my hand. I didn't have time to gasp. I didn't have time to drop the jagged stem that remained. The world tilted violently on its axis. A hand, large and unyielding as an iron clamp, gripped the nape of my neck and shoved me downward. My knees hit the marble floor with a bone-jarring crack, tearing through the layers of silk and tulle that cost more than my childhood home. "Down," a voice growled, low and vibrating against my ear. The air erupted. It wasn't just one shot anymore. The ballroom of the Venetian, decked out in white roses and enough crystal to blind a man, became a kill box. The sound was deafening, a chaotic symphony of shattering glass, women's high-pitched screams, and the distinct, rhythmic asterisk thud-thud-thud of semi-automatic fire. I was flattened against the cold tiles, my face pressed into the dust and spilled alcohol. Above me, a weight settled, heavy, warm, and suffocating. Lorenzo. My husband, of exactly 1 hour. He covered me completely, his broad tuxedo-clad back acting as a human shield. I could feel the tension in his muscles, hard as granite against my spine. He wasn't trembling. While the rest of the room dissolved into panic, he was perfectly, terrifyingly still. "Stay," he whispered. It wasn't a request. It was a command given to a dog. "If you lift your head, Elena, you will lose it." "Lorenzo," I choked out, the name tasting like ash. "What is?" "Quiet." He shifted his weight, reaching inside his jacket. The movement was fluid, practiced. I turned my head just enough to see through the veil of lace that had torn from my hair. 3 men were advancing through the smoke near the head table, wearing catering uniforms that fit too tightly across their chests. They held suppressed pistols, their eyes scanning the floor, looking for us. They weren't spraying bullets blindly, they were hunting. Lorenzo didn't panic. He didn't yell for his security. He exhaled a breath that smelled of scotch and mint, and then he moved off me with the speed of a striking cobra. He rose to a crouch, his right arm extending. Bang, bang. The first attacker's head snapped back, a bloom of red mist painting the white floral arrangement behind him. The second man turned, raising his weapon, but Lorenzo was already moving forward. My new husband didn't retreat, he closed the distance. He grabbed a silver steak knife from a toppled table as he surged past me. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the sounds were inescapable. The wet, sickening crunch of metal meeting cartilage, a gurgling cry that was cut short, the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor. When I opened my eyes again, silence had rushed back into the room, heavier than the noise. The guests were cowering under tables. The smell of gunpowder was acrid, burning the back of my throat, warring with the scent of the hundreds of gardenias that lined the walls. Lorenzo stood over the third man, who was crawling backward, clutching a shattered kneecap. Lorenzo looked like a fallen angel in the wreckage, his bow tie undone, his tuxedo jacket dusted with plaster from the bullet holes in the wall, and his face a mask of bored indifference. He stepped on the man's injured leg, grinding his patent leather shoe down. The assassin screamed, a raw, animalistic sound that made my stomach turn. "Who sent you?" Lorenzo asked. His voice was conversational, as if he were asking about the weather, not interrogating a man bleeding out on a wedding dance floor. The man spat blood at Lorenzo's shoes. "Go to hell, D'Angelo." Lorenzo didn't blink. He just sighed, a sound of profound irritation. "I'm already there, I just got married." He raised his gun and put a single bullet between the man's eyes. The finality of the sound made me flinch violently. I scrambled backward, my heels slipping on the slick floor, until my back hit the leg of the overturned cake table. Lorenzo turned to me. His eyes were dark, almost black in the dim emergency lighting that had flickered on. He holstered the gun at the small of his back and walked toward me, stepping over the corpse without glancing down. He towered over me, extending a hand. His palm was calloused, contrasting with the expensive cut of his suit. There was a smear of blood on his cufflink, a diamond the size of a refined sugar cube. "Get up, Elena," he said. I stared at his hand. I looked at the dead men. I looked at my father, who was cowering behind a pillar near the exit, pale and shaking, useless. "You killed them," I whispered. My voice sounded foreign, thin and reedy. "They were going to kill you," Lorenzo stated flatly. "Consider it a wedding gift. I keep what is mine." Mine. The word hung in the air, heavier than the smoke. I wasn't a person to him. I was an asset. A merger acquisition between the D'Angelo crime family and my father's failing shipping empire. I slapped his hand away and pushed myself up, my legs trembling so hard I thought they would snap. My dress was ruined, stained with champagne and gray dust. "This wasn't part of the deal, Lorenzo," my father said. "Your father," Lorenzo interrupted, his eyes sliding contemptuously toward the man behind the pillar, "is a fool who thinks he can swim with sharks without getting bitten. We are leaving. The police are on my payroll. They will arrive in 10 minutes to take statements and clean up the mess. By then, we will be gone." He reached out and grabbed my upper arm. His grip was bruising, possessive. He pulled me close, so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. For a second, I thought he might comfort me. I thought he might offer a lie to make the horror palatable. "Do not make a scene, Elena," he murmured, his voice lethal velvet. "Walk with your head up. If you look weak, they will circle back. You are a D'Angelo now, you do not cower." He didn't wait for my agreement. He marched me through the wreckage of our reception. We stepped over glass shards and broken porcelain. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to look at the guests, the politicians, the judges, the rival bosses, who stared at us with a mixture of fear and calculation. We burst through the service doors into the humid night air of the loading dock. A convoy of 3 black armored SUVs was already idling, engines purring like restrained beasts. Lorenzo shoved me into the back of the middle vehicle and climbed in after me. The door slammed shut, sealing us in a leather-scented cocoon of silence. "Drive," Lorenzo ordered the driver. As the car peeled away, tires screeching against the asphalt, Lorenzo pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. He reached out and wiped a speck of blood from my cheek, blood that wasn't mine. "You're shaking," he observed. "I almost died," I snapped, the adrenaline finally giving way to anger. "You brought me into a war zone." "I brought you into my world. There is no difference." He crumbled the stained handkerchief and tossed it onto the floorboard. "The attack was sloppy, amateurs." "They were trying to kill us, Lorenzo. Who were they?" He looked out the tinted window as the city lights blurred past. "Not asterisk us asterisk, Elena. You." I froze. The cold air conditioning of the car suddenly felt like ice against my skin. "What?" He turned back to me, and a cruel, humorless smile touched his lips. "They weren't shooting at me. The first shot was aimed at your chest. I saw the red dot before you even heard the glass break." "Why?" I whispered. "I'm nobody. I'm just the leverage for the shipping routes." "Exactly," Lorenzo said softly. "Someone doesn't want this merger to happen, and the easiest way to void the contract isn't to kill the Dawn. It's to break the bridge." He leaned back, closing his eyes, dismissing me. "Welcome to the family, wife. Try to stay alive. It would be inconvenient to replace you so soon." I stared at him, this monster in a bespoke suit, and realized with a sinking heart that the danger hadn't ended in the ballroom. The gunshots were just the overture. The real danger was sitting right next to me, eyes closed, calm as a tomb, dragging me into a darkness I had no hope of navigating alone. And the worst part, when he had covered my body with his, when the bullets were flying and death was inches away. For the first time in my life, I had felt safe. I turned away from him, watching the city disappear, and wondered which one of us would kill the other first. The silence inside the armored Maybach was heavier than the steel plating that separated us from the chaos outside. The city lights of Chicago smeared into long, neon ribbons against the tinted glass, a stark contrast to the darkness sitting beside me. Lorenzo DeLuca didn't look like a man who had just survived an assassination attempt. He looked bored. He pulled a pristine white handkerchief from his breast pocket, dabbing at a speck of blood on his cuff. Not his, certainly. Maybe the waiter's, maybe my cousin's. "Stop shaking," he commanded, his voice low and vibrating through the leather seat. He didn't look at me. "It annoys me." "I'm not shaking because I'm cold," I snapped, though my teeth actually clattered together. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving behind a shivering, hollowed-out wreck of a bride. "People just died, Lorenzo. Your people, my family." "Your family ducked," he replied dryly, folding the handkerchief with geometric precision. "My men died doing their jobs. There is a distinction." "You're a sociopath." He finally turned his head. The streetlights caught the hard angles of his face, illuminating the predatory intelligence in his eyes. "I am a businessman, Elena. Emotions are a liability in my line of work. Panic gets you killed. Sentimentality gets you tortured. I suggest you purge both from your system immediately." The car took a sharp turn, the suspension absorbing the violence of the maneuver, but I slid across the leather, my shoulder bumping against his arm. His muscles were rigid, like stone wrapped in silk. I flinched away as if burned. "Where are we going?" I asked, gripping the door handle, though I knew it was locked. "Take me back to my father. The wedding is over. The deal is obviously off." Lorenzo let out a dark, humorless chuckle. It was a terrifying sound, dry as bone. "Take you back? You really haven't been paying attention, have you, asterisk tesoro?" "The contract was for a merger," I argued, my voice rising. "A union of families to secure the port authorities and the shipping lanes. If we are under attack, the alliance is a risk. My father will want to reassess." "Your father," Lorenzo interrupted, his voice dropping to a whisper that scraped against my nerves, "is currently halfway to a private airfield, likely fleeing to the Cayman Islands until the heat dies down. He doesn't want you back, Elena. He can't afford you." I froze. What does that mean? Lorenzo shifted, his body turning fully toward me. The space in the car seemed to shrink, the air sucked out by his sheer presence. "Do you think I married you for shipping routes? I already control the ports. I bought the harbor master 3 years ago and buried the previous union head under a construction site in Jersey." The blood drained from my face. "Then why?" "Because your father is a degenerate gambler with a taste for high-stakes baccarat and absolutely no skill for it," Lorenzo said, the words hitting me like physical blows. "He didn't give you to me to seal a partnership, Elena. He sold you to me to settle a $50 million debt." The world tilted. I pressed my hand against the cold glass, trying to anchor myself. "No, that's a lie. He loves me. I'm his only daughter." "He loves his knees," Lorenzo corrected brutally. "And he knew that if he didn't hand over his most valuable asset, his pristine, educated, untouched daughter, I was going to shatter them with a sledgehammer. You aren't a bride, Elena. You're a receipt. You're the collateral that keeps your father breathing." I couldn't breathe. The corset of my wedding dress felt like it was crushing my ribs. My father. The man who had walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes an hour ago. They weren't tears of joy. They were tears of relief. He had washed his hands of his debt and his daughter in one motion. "I don't believe you," I whispered, though the sickness in my gut told me it was the truth. It explained everything. The rush of the wedding, the lack of negotiation, the way my father wouldn't look me in the eye during the vows. "Belief is irrelevant to reality," Lorenzo said. He tapped the partition glass, signaling the driver. The car began to slow. "We're here." I looked out the window. We weren't at a safe house. We were pulling into the underground garage of the DeLuca Tower, a glass needle piercing the Chicago skyline. It was a fortress of steel and arrogance. The car stopped. The doors unlocked with a heavy asterisk thud. "Get out," he ordered. "I won't," I said, clutching the seat. "I'm not going with you. I'm not your property." Lorenzo didn't sigh. He didn't argue. He simply moved. Before I could scream, he had exited his side, circled the car, and ripped my door open. His hand shot out, wrapping around my upper arm. His grip was bruising, absolute. He hauled me out of the car, my heels skidding on the concrete, the train of my ruined wedding dress dragging through the oil and grime of the garage floor. "Let go of me," I thrashed, beating my free hand against his chest. It was like hitting a wall. He ignored me, dragging me toward a private elevator bank guarded by two men with assault rifles. They didn't even blink as their boss hauled his new wife across the floor like a sack of unwanted laundry. Lorenzo shoved me into the elevator and slammed his palm against the penthouse button. The doors slid shut, sealing us in a mirrored box. I backed into the corner, chest heaving. "You can't keep me here. This is kidnapping." "It's marriage," he countered, loosening his tie with one hand while watching me through the reflection in the doors. "Under the laws of our world, you belong to me until I say otherwise. And considering the size of your father's debt, you're going to be here a very long time." The elevator dinged softly, opening directly into a sprawling, cold living space. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, but the glass was thick, bulletproof, and tinted. The furniture was minimal, sharp-edged, and devoid of warmth. It wasn't a home. It was a high-altitude cage. Lorenzo stepped out, pulling me with him. He released my arm, sending me stumbling onto the polished marble floor. I caught myself on a black granite island, spinning to face him. "So what now?" I hissed, trying to mask my terror with rage. "You lock me in a tower, you rape me. Is that the plan?" Lorenzo paused, his hand halfway to unbuttoning his suit jacket. He looked at me, his gaze sweeping from my disheveled hair down to the hem of my dirty dress. His expression was unreadable, cold as the void. "I don't touch things that don't want to be touched, Elena. It bores me," he said, tossing his jacket onto a chair. "And I don't need to force you. You are here to serve a purpose. Your presence in my house guarantees your father's compliance. If you run, he dies. If you scream, he dies. If you inconvenience me too much, he dies." He walked toward a wet bar, pouring himself a tumbler of amber liquid. He didn't offer me any. "You are free to roam the penthouse," he continued, taking a sip. "But the elevators require a biometric scan. The stairwells are alarmed, and the balcony has pressure sensors. If you try to leave, my security team will break your legs before you reach the lobby. Do we understand each other?" I stared at him, hatred bubbling up in my throat, hot and acidic. "You're a monster." "I am a man who collects what is owed to him," he said, walking toward me. He stopped inches away, invading my personal space, smelling of expensive scotch and gunpowder. He reached out, his fingers grazing my chin, forcing me to look up at him. His eyes were dark pools, devoid of light. "You wanted a fairy tale, asterisk principessa asterisk, but you were born into a nightmare. My advice, wake up, quickly." He dropped his hand and walked toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms. "The guest room is the second door on the left," he called out over his shoulder, not looking back. "Lock the door if it makes you feel better. I have the master key anyway." I stood alone in the center of the vast, cold room, the city of Chicago sprawling below me like a bed of embers. I looked at the heavy steel doors of the elevator, then at the man disappearing into the shadows of his fortress. Lorenzo De Luca thought I was just collateral. He thought I was a broken bird he could keep in a glass jar. I looked down at my hands, still stained with the blood from the car. He was right about one thing. My father had sold me. The family I loved was a lie, but Lorenzo had made a miscalculation. He thought he had brought a victim into his home. I wiped the blood onto the white silk of my dress, leaving a long, red streak. If I was going to be a prisoner in hell, I would make sure the devil regretted letting me in. The silence in the penthouse wasn't peaceful. It was predatory. It was the kind of heavy, pressurized quiet found at the bottom of the ocean, waiting to crush anything that wasn't built to withstand the depth. I waited inside the guest room for what felt like an hour, my back pressed against the door I had audibly locked. I needed Lorenzo to hear the click. I needed him to believe the trembling, terrified girl was cowering in the dark, praying for morning. But I wasn't praying. I was listening. The faint, rhythmic thrum of the building's ventilation system was the only sound. No footsteps, no clinking of glass, no television. Lorenzo De Luca had retreated into the master suite, presumably to wash the night off his skin. I pushed away from the door and peeled off the blood-streaked silk dress. I couldn't move in it, and the metallic scent of it was making me nauseous. I found a silk robe in the closet, charcoal gray, smelling of cedar and nothingness, and cinched it tight around my waist. I left my heels where they had fallen. If I was going to hunt, I needed to be silent. My bare feet made no sound on the polished concrete floor as I eased the lock back. The mechanism was well-oiled, sliding open with a whisper that was swallowed by the vastness of the hallway. I stepped out. The corridor was a study in minimalism and menace. Track lighting cast long, jagged shadows against the walls, which were adorned with art that looked more like Rorschach tests for psychopaths than decoration. I crept past the master bedroom. The door was shut, a slab of black oak that looked impenetrable. My target was the room we had passed earlier, the office, the nerve center. Lorenzo had mentioned a debt. He had mentioned my father's incompetence. If I was going to survive this, if I was going to turn the tables, I needed to understand the ledger. I needed to know exactly how much I was worth and where the bodies were buried. Every man like Lorenzo had a weakness. Usually it was money. Sometimes it was ego. I hoped to find evidence of either. I reached the double doors of his study. They were frosted glass, framed in steel. I reached for the handle, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, fully expecting it to be locked. I braced myself for the disappointment, for the need to find a vent or a key card. The handle turned. I froze, the cold metal biting into my palm. It was unlocked. A shiver of unease wrestled with my relief. Why leave the center of his criminal empire accessible? Arrogance. It had to be. He didn't lock the door because he didn't fear me. To him, I was a sheep he'd brought into the wolf's den. Sheep don't raid the pantry. I'll make you choke on that arrogance, Lorenzo. I slipped inside and closed the door, leaving it open a crack, just in case I needed to hear an approach. The office was freezing. The air conditioning was cranked down low, preserving the wall of servers humming softly in a glass-encased rack near the window. The room smelled of old leather, expensive scotch, and the ozone tang of high-voltage electronics. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago, the city lights glittering like diamonds on black velvet. It was a king's view, a god's view. I moved to the desk. It was a massive slab of petrified wood, devoid of clutter. No loose papers, no stray pens, just a sleek computer terminal and a single, heavy crystal tumbler with a centimeter of amber liquid left in the bottom. I touched the mouse. The screen flared to life, demanding a biometric scan, a thumbprint. "Damn it," I whispered. I tried the drawers, locked, of course. I stepped back, frustration heating my face. I scanned the room. Bookshelves lined the far wall. I ran my fingers over the spines, Clausewitz, Machiavelli, corporate law, international tax codes. Everything you'd expect from a man who treated war like a business and business like a war. Then I saw it. In the corner, nestled between two leather armchairs, was a low mahogany cabinet. It looked like a humidor or a drink cart, but it didn't fit the stark, modern aesthetic of the rest of the room. It looked older, personal. I knelt before it. There was a keyhole, a simple brass mechanism. I pulled the bobby pin from my hair. It was a trick I'd learned in my rebellious teenage years, sneaking into my father's liquor cabinet when things got too loud at home. This lock was more sophisticated than a cabinet latch, but not by much. It wasn't digital. It relied on tumblers. I worked the pin, biting my lip until I tasted copper. Click. The door swung open. It wasn't a humidor. It was a filing cabinet. Inside, hanging folders were densely packed. I flicked through the tabs, squinting in the dim light of the city glow. Petrov, the Irish, Port Authority, Senator Reeves. Leverage. This was his blackmail box. This was the physical insurance policy for when the digital world failed. My fingers flew across the tabs, looking for asterisk, Morty asterisk. I needed to see the debt. I needed to see the signature that had sold me. I found the M section, Morty Giovanni. I pulled the file. It was thick. I opened it on the floor, spreading the papers out. There were loan documents, gambling markers, photos of my father shaking hands with men who looked like they dissolved people in acid for a living. The dates went back 6 months. The total was staggering. $5 million. My stomach twisted. My father hadn't just stumbled. He had driven us off a cliff. I went to shove the papers back in when another folder caught my eye. It was jammed improperly behind the M section, as if placed there hastily, or perhaps hidden even from the filing system itself. It didn't have a name on the tab. It just had a symbol drawn in black ink, a chessboard knight. Curiosity overrode my fear. I pulled the unmarked file. It was heavier than my father's. I flipped it open, and the air left my lungs in a sharp, painful whoosh. The first page wasn't a document. It was a photograph. It was me. I was wearing a yellow sundress, laughing, an ice cream cone in my hand. I was walking down Michigan Avenue. I stared at the photo, my brain trying to process the context. I remembered that dress. I threw it away years ago. I looked at the date stamp in the corner of the grainy, surveillance-style photo. August 14th, 3 years ago. My hands began to shake, rattling the stiff paper. 3 years? The debt was only 6 months old. My father hadn't even met Lorenzo DeLuca 3 years ago. I turned the page. Another photo. Me in the university library, head on a desk, asleep next to a stack of biology textbooks. Taken from a distance, likely with a telephoto lens. October 2nd, 2 years ago. I flipped faster, panic rising in my throat like bile. Me at a coffee shop. Me arguing with my ex-boyfriend outside a movie theater. Me buying flowers for my mother's grave. There were notes scribbled in the margins in sharp, angular handwriting. Lorenzo's handwriting. Subject prefers lilies. Allergic to strawberries. Broke up with target Kyle at 21:00 hours. Vulnerable. It wasn't a debt collection file. It was a dossier. I reached the middle of the stack and found a printed email. It was dated 18 months ago. It was from a private investigator, addressed to L. DeLuca asterisk. Subject, Elena Morty. Status, unattainable. Father's business is stable. No leverage available currently. Below that, a reply from Lorenzo, sent 2 minutes later. Destabilize it. Create the leverage. I want to weigh in by the end of the year. The world tilted on its axis. The room spun. My father hadn't just failed. He had been sabotaged. Lorenzo hadn't stumbled upon a debtor with a pretty daughter he could take as payment. He had engineered the debt. He had destroyed my father's business, piece by piece, systematically cutting the legs out from under my family, solely to create a hole deep enough that I would be the only way to fill it. This wasn't business. This wasn't a mafia arrangement. He had been hunting me for 3 years. I looked at the last photo in the stack. It was taken yesterday, through the window of my bedroom in my father's house. I was brushing my hair, looking in the mirror. The caption beneath it was just one word, underlined so hard the pen had torn through the paper. Mine. A sound from the hallway made my blood turn to ice. The heavy thud of the master bedroom door opening. I scrambled, shoving the photos back into the folder. My hands were trembling so violently I crinkled the edges. I jammed the unmarked file back into the cabinet, behind the others, and slammed the little mahogany door shut. I didn't have time to lock it. I grabbed the bobby pin from the carpet and scrambled to my feet, my breath coming in short, terrified gasps. The footsteps were heavy, slow, deliberate. They were coming toward the office. I looked around frantically. There was nowhere to hide. The desk was open underneath. The curtains were sheer. I had seconds. I realized I was still holding one piece of paper, the photo of me in the yellow dress. I crushed it into the pocket of the silk robe, my fist tightening around the evidence. I couldn't get out. If I opened the door now, I'd run right into him. Think, Elena, think. I moved away from the cabinet, rushing toward the liquor cart near the window. I grabbed a decanter of scotch, my hand shaking, and splashed a small amount into a glass. I spun around, leaning my hip against the glass desk, trying to slow my breathing, trying to arrange my features into a mask of bored defiance rather than abject terror. The door handle turned. Lorenzo pushed the door open. He wasn't wearing the suit anymore. He was in black lounge pants, his chest bare, displaying a tapestry of scars and tattoos that glistened in the low light. His hair was damp. He looked raw, dangerous, and overwhelmingly large in the doorway. He stopped when he saw me. His eyes didn't go to the cabinet. They went straight to my face, then down to the silk robe that was barely holding together, then back up to my eyes. He didn't look surprised to find me there. He looked satisfied. Couldn't sleep, asterisk Tesoro. His voice rumbled, low and scratchy, like gravel over velvet. I took a sip of the scotch. It burned all the way down, grounding me. "Your house is too quiet," I said, my voice steadier than I had any right to expect. "It feels like a mausoleum." Lorenzo stepped into the room, the door clicking shut behind him. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "It's not a mausoleum, Elena," he said, walking toward me. He moved with the grace of a jungle cat, silent and lethal. "It's a vault." He stopped inches from me. I could smell the soap on his skin, mixed with the natural, musky scent of a man who possessed too much testosterone and too little conscience. He reached out, his fingers grazing the lapel of the robe, right over the pocket where the crumpled photo lay hidden against my heart. "And now," he whispered, his dark eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that suddenly made sense, a terrifying 3-year-old sense. "The vault is finally full." He knew. He had to know I'd seen something, or maybe he didn't care. Maybe he wanted me to know. I stared up at him, realizing the monster I had married wasn't just a cold-hearted businessman. He was something much worse. He was a man obsessed, and I was no longer just a prisoner of debt. I was the prize he had cheated destiny to win. The silence that followed his declaration was heavy, pressing against my eardrums like deep water. The vault is finally full. The words replayed in my mind, stripping away the illusion that this marriage was merely a transaction to settle my father's gambling debts. Lorenzo didn't wait for me to process the horror of it. The mask slid back into place, the cold, impenetrable visage of the dawn. "Get dressed," he commanded, his voice devoid of the passion that had just flared in his eyes. He turned his back to me, adjusting his cufflinks. "The summit starts in an hour, and Elena, wear the red one, it looks like blood." The grand hall of the Palazzo Vittoria was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal, filled with the kind of people who signed death warrants with fountain pens. The air smelled of expensive perfume, aged scotch, and the metallic tang of suppressed violence. I stood at the top of the marble staircase, my hand resting on Lorenzo's forearm. The red silk dress he had chosen clung to me like a second skin, slitted high up the thigh, leaving my back entirely bare. It was a dress designed to distract, to entice, to proclaim ownership. Smile asterisk tesoro, Lorenzo murmured, his lips brushing my ear. The heat of his breath sent a traitorous shiver down my spine. Whatever you are feeling, fear, hatred, confusion, bury it. Tonight, you are the adored wife of the Capo dei Capi. If they smell weakness on you, they will eat you alive. I'm not the one they should be worried about, I whispered back, forcing the corners of my mouth upward. His grip on my arm tightened, possessive and bruising. That's my girl. We descended. Every eye in the room turned. I felt the weight of their gazes, some envious, some lustful, all calculating. This was the summit, the annual gathering of the 5 families to discuss territories and truces, but tonight it felt like a gladiatorial arena. We circulated. I played my part, accepting kisses on the hand from men who had likely strangled rivals with those same fingers. Lorenz was a wall of obsidian at my side, his charm lethal and precise. He laughed at the right moments, steered conversations away from business, and kept a hand on the small of my back, a brand that burned through the silk. Don Rossi, Lorenzo greeted a sprawling, thick-necked man with a scar running through his eyebrow. You look well. And you, Lorenzo, look occupied, Rossi said, his eyes raking over me with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Marriage suits you. I never thought I'd see the wolf of Sicily on a leash. Lorenzo didn't flinch. He pulled me imperceptibly closer, his thumbs stroking the sensitive skin of my hip. A wolf only walks with a mate of equal appetite, Rossi. Be careful you don't mistake devotion for domestication. The tension spiked, sharp and sudden, before the orchestra began to play. A waltz. Dance with me, Lorenzo said. It wasn't a question. He swept me onto the floor before I could protest. His hand splayed wide across my bare back, skin against skin. The contact was electric, a jolt that made my breath hitch. Despite the fear, despite the revelation in the bedroom, my body recognized him. It responded to his size, his power, the sheer masculine gravity he exuded. We moved in perfect synchronization, a lie set to music. You're trembling, he noted, his voice low. I'm dancing with a psychopath who thinks I'm a collectible, I shot back, keeping my smile plastered on for the onlookers. A collectible sits on a shelf, Elena. You are far more useful than that. He spun me, the red silk flaring out. When he pulled me back, our chests collided. You are the leverage that keeps your father breathing, and you are the only thing in this room that belongs solely to me. Is that what this is? I looked up into his eyes, searching for the man I thought I knew. Possession. Survival, he corrected. Look around you. Do you see Pietro Vance, the man by the bar? I glanced quickly. A wiry man with pale eyes was watching us. He tried to buy your debt 3 months ago, Lorenzo whispered, his lips grazing my temple. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a plaything for his soldiers. I outbid him. I killed 2 of his lieutenants to ensure the contract came to me. My step faltered. Lorenzo caught me effortlessly, holding me up. You knew about the debt before my father approached you. I engineered the debt, Elena. The world tilted. The lights of the chandeliers blurred. He hadn't just bylaid my father out. He had trapped him. He had orchestrated the entire downfall of my family just to acquire me. Why? I breathed, horror mixing with a sick sort of awe. Because, he said, his eyes darkening to the color of a bruised sky, I don't leave my destiny to chance. The music swelled to a crescendo, and we stopped. But before we could leave the floor, a shadow fell over us. May I cut in? It was Vance. Up close, he smelled of sour wine and malice. He didn't wait for an answer. He reached out, his fingers closing around my upper arm. His touch was damp, repulsive. Lorenzo has monopolized you all evening, asterisk, Signora asterisk, Vance sneered, his gaze dropping to my cleavage. It's only fair to share the wealth. The air in the ballroom seemed to vanish. Lorenzo went still. It was the stillness of a predator before the strike. He didn't look at Vance's face. He looked at Vance's hand touching my skin. "Remove your hand," Lorenzo said. The tone was conversational, which made it terrifying. Vance laughed, a nervous, hacking sound. "Come now, Lorenzo. We are all friends here. Surely you can spare one dance." Vance's fingers squeezed my arm, his thumb rubbing against the inside of my bicep. It was a violation, a testing of boundaries. The reaction was instantaneous. Lorenzo moved faster than the eye could follow. One moment he was standing still. The next, he had seized Vance's wrist, twisting it with a sickening asterisk crack of bone. Vance screamed, dropping to his knees. The music stopped. The chatter died. Every guard in the room reached for a weapon. Lorenzo didn't draw a gun. He didn't need to. He stood over the kneeling man, still holding the broken wrist, his face a mask of bored cruelty. But his eyes were an inferno. "I told you," Lorenzo said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. "She is not a debt to be traded. She is not a negotiation." He kicked Vance in the chest, sending the rival dons sprawling onto the polished parquet. Lorenzo stepped forward, placing a gleaming, patent leather shoe on Vance's throat, applying just enough pressure to make the man gasp for air. "Lorenzo," I hissed, terrified, "you'll start a war." He looked at me then. For the first time all night, the mask was gone completely. There was no cold businessman. There was only raw, unadulterated violence and a terrifying adoration. "Let them come," he said to me, though the room heard it. He looked back down at Vance, whose face was turning purple. "If you ever touch her again," Lorenzo snarled, drawing a silver switchblade from his pocket and flicking it open, "I won't break your wrist. I will cut off your hands and feed them to you." He slammed the blade into the floorboards, a fraction of an inch from Vance's ear. The wood splintered. Lorenzo stepped back, straightening his jacket. He offered me his hand, his blood-stained fingers steady. "Shall we, my love? The air in here has become stale." I stared at his hand, the hand of a monster, the hand of the man who had ruined my family to possess me. And yet, looking at Vance writhing on the floor, the man who would have passed me around to his soldiers, a dark, twisted realization took root in my chest. Lorenzo was a monster, but he was the monster standing between me and the abyss. I took his hand. "Yes," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough to be heard. "Let's go home." As we walked out, leaving a room full of stunned Mafia royalty in our wake, I realized the terrifying truth of the vault. I wasn't just a prisoner. I was the queen of a kingdom built on blood. And tonight, the king had just declared war on the world for daring to look at his crown. The rain began the moment we stepped outside, a torrential downpour that seemed to scrub the city of its sins, though I knew it wouldn't be enough to wash the blood from Lorenzo's knuckles. His grip on my hand was ironclad, possessive. My heels clicked against the wet pavement, the rhythm frantic, matching the erratic thumping of my heart. The guards flanked us, forming a human shield of black umbrellas and grim faces, but I didn't see them. All I saw was the profile of the man beside me. His jaw was set in a line hard enough to cut glass, his breathing even, unbothered. He opened the back door of the limousine himself, ignoring the driver who scrambled to assist. He ushered me inside with a shove that was gentle, yet brooked no argument. I tumbled onto the plush leather, the scent of expensive cedar and stale fear clinging to the air. Lorenzo slid in next to me. The heavy door slammed shut, sealing us in a vacuum of silence. "Drive," he commanded, his voice dark and smooth like velvet dragged over gravel. The partition window hummed as it rose, blacking out the driver's compartment, leaving us alone in the dimly lit interior. I pressed my back against the door, putting as much distance between us as the luxury car allowed. My chest heaved. The adrenaline that had sustained me in the warehouse was crashing, leaving behind a shivering, volatile cocktail of terror and something else, something hot and shameful that coiled in my lower belly. Lorenzo didn't look at me. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a pristine white silk handkerchief. With methodical, terrifying precision, he began to wipe Vance's blood from his fingers. One finger at a time. The red stained the white silk, blooming like corrupted roses. "You're insane," I whispered. The words felt inadequate, tiny stones thrown at a fortress. He paused, the cloth hovering over his thumb. He turned his head slowly, his eyes capturing mine in the gloom. They were dilated, black pools swallowing the faint streetlights streaking past the tinted windows. "Insane," he repeated, tasting the word. "Is that what you call survival, cara mia asterisk? Is that what you call loyalty?" "You almost severed his head in front of the entire commission," I snapped, my voice rising. The fear was transmuting into anger, a defense mechanism I desperately needed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've put a target on our backs, on my asterisk back." Lorenzo chuckled, a low, menacing sound that vibrated through the seat. He crumpled the stained handkerchief and tossed it onto the floor mat as if it were trash. "The target was already there, Elena. I just made sure the people aiming at it know that if they pull the trigger, they lose the hand that holds the gun." He moved then. It was sudden, a blur of motion that ended with him looming over me, trapping me against the door. His hands slammed into the leather on either side of my head, caging me in. The scent of him, gunpowder, metallic blood, and spicy cologne, flooded my senses. "And you," he hissed, leaning in until his nose brushed mine. "You took my hand. You walked out with me. You chose your side." "I had no choice," I cried out, pushing against his chest. It was like pushing against a marble statue. "It was you or Vance. That's not a choice, Lorenzo. That's an ultimatum between two devils." "And yet," he murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips, "you seem to prefer the devil you know." "I hate you." The words were meant to be a lash, but they came out breathless, betraying me. His eyes flared with a dark, predatory hunger. The violence in the warehouse hadn't sated him, it had only woken the beast further. "Good. Hate is passion, hate is fire. Indifference is what I cannot abide." One of his hands left the leather and wrapped around my throat. He didn't squeeze, not enough to choke, but the weight of his palm, the threat of his strength, sent a jolt of electricity straight down my spine. My breath hitched. I should be terrified. I was terrified. But the adrenaline was rewiring my brain, confusing the fear of death with the thrill of survival. "You think I'm a monster," he whispered, his thumb stroking the pulse that fluttered wildly in my neck. "But you were the one watching Vance bleed with that look in your eyes. You liked it." "I didn't," I lied. "Liar." He crushed his mouth to mine. It wasn't a kiss. It was a collision. It was punishment and possession all at once. His lips were hard, bruising, demanding entry. I gasped, and his tongue swept in, tasting me, conquering me. I should have fought him. I should have scratched and clawed. But my hands, traitorous things, found purchase on the lapels of his jacket, pulling him closer. The sheer, raw power radiating off him was intoxicating. It was the ultimate corruption, to be desired by the most dangerous man in the city. He groaned into my mouth, the sound guttural and desperate. His hand slid from my throat down the front of my dress, finding the curve of my breast. He squeezed, rough and possessive, and a whimper tore from my throat. "You belong to me," he growled against my lips, biting my lower lip hard enough to taste copper. "Every inch, every breath, every dark thought you try to hide." "Lorenzo," I panted, my head falling back against the seat as his lips trailed down my jawline, finding the sensitive spot beneath my ear. He shifted, his heavy body pressing me into the upholstery. His knee drove between my legs, spreading them wide, the friction of the expensive suit fabric against my thighs sending shockwaves through me. The car hit a bump, jolting us together, and the contact was electric. I was burning up. The horror of the night, the blood on the floor, the threats, it all funneled into this moment of primal need. I wanted to forget. I wanted to be obliterated by him so I wouldn't have to think about the war he had just started. His hand fumbled with the hem of my dress, shoving the fabric up. Cool air hit my skin, followed immediately by the scorching heat of his palms sliding up my thigh. His fingers dug into my flesh, leaving marks that would surely bruise. "Lorenzo, please," I whispered, not even sure what I was begging for. "Release. Mercy." He reached the apex of my thighs, his fingers brushing against the silk of my panties. I arched into his touch, my dignity fracturing under the weight of this insane, chemical magnetism. "Please what?" he taunted, his voice ragged. He nipped at the skin of my neck. "Tell me what you want, Elena. Do you want the monster to take you right here, while my men drive us through the city?" "Yes," I sobbed out, the word tearing itself from my chest. His fingers slipped beneath the lace. He found me slick, ready for him despite my protests, despite my hate. He stroked me once, a masterful, wicked touch that made my vision blur. I dug my nails into his shoulders, bracing for him to take me, to finish what the violence had started. And then he stopped. The hand withdrew. The weight of his body lifted. I gasped, my eyes flying open, confused and bereft. Lorenzo sat back, smoothing his tie, his chest heaving as he fought for control. His eyes were blown wide, burning with a mix of lust and cold, calculating resolve. He looked at me, disheveled, dress hiked up, lips swollen, chest heaving, and a cruel satisfaction curled his lip. "No," he said simply. The rejection was a physical blow. "What?" He grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. The heat was still there, raging behind his eyes, but his will was stronger. "I won't take you like this," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "I won't be a reaction to your fear. I won't be the drug you used to forget what you saw tonight." I hurriedly pulled my dress down, shame flooding my face, hot and stinging. "You started this." "And I am finishing it," he countered. "Because when I finally seek my release inside you, Elena, it won't be because you are scared. And it won't be because you are desperate for a distraction." He leaned in again, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him, but he didn't touch me, not even a graze. "You will give yourself to me," he said, the words ringing with absolute authority. "Not your body, that is easy to take. I want your will. I want you to look me in the eye knowing exactly what I am and tell me that you belong to me. Not the family, not the contract, me asterisk." "I will never say that," I spat, trembling with sexual frustration and humiliation. Lorenzo sat back, crossing his legs, regaining the composure of the dawn, though the bulge in his trousers betrayed him. He looked out the window at the rain-streaked city passing by. "You will," he said softly, with the terrifying confidence of a man who never lost. "Tonight, you saw the lengths I will go to keep what is mine. Soon, you will realize that being mine is the only thing that matters." The car slowed, turning through the iron gates of his estate. The gravel crunched beneath the tires, a sound of finality. We sat in the heavy silence, the air between us charged with unspent energy, and a war that had shifted from the streets to the very localized, dangerous geography of this marriage. He hadn't taken my body, but as the car came to a halt, I realized with a sinking dread that he had done something far more dangerous. He had drawn a line in the sand, and he was forcing me to walk across it willingly. The driver opened the door, letting in the cool night air. Lorenzo stepped out, then turned, extending that same blood-stained hand to me. "Coming wife." I stared at his hand. The frustration burned in my veins, hot and agonizing. I wanted to slap him. I wanted to kiss him. I took his hand and stepped out into the night, knowing that the real danger wasn't Vance or the commission. It was the man holding me and the terrifying fact that for a moment in that car, I had wanted to belong to him. The elevator ride to the penthouse was a suffocating ascent. The golden numbers ticked upward, counting down the seconds until we were alone, enclosed in the fortress of glass and steel that Lorenzo called home. He didn't speak. He simply stood there, checking the magazine of his sidearm, wiping the residual grime of the night from the slide with a handkerchief. "Stay inside tonight," Lorenzo said as the doors slid open. His voice was gravel, leaving no room for argument. "I have loose ends to tie up with the commission regarding Vance. The guards are at the door. Do not open it for anyone but me." "Lorenzo," I started, reaching for his arm. The fabric of his suit was rough under my fingertips. He paused, looking down at me. For a second, the mask slipped. I saw exhaustion, and behind that, a possessiveness that made my knees weak. He leaned in, pressing a hard, searing kiss to my forehead. It felt like a brand. "Wait for me, Elena." Then he was gone, the elevator swallowing him back into the underworld. I paced the living room for an hour, the adrenaline from the car chase slowly curdling into anxiety. I poured a glass of scotch, staring out at the city lights, wondering if I had just fallen in love with a monster or a savior. The lights flickered. I set the glass down. The high-tech security system usually hummed with a low, reassuring frequency. Now, silence. I moved toward the panic button near the kitchen island, but before I could reach it, the service entrance exploded inward. Not with a bang, but with the quiet hiss of a bypassed lock and a heavy shove. I grabbed a steak knife from the block, spinning around, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Put it down, El, it's me." I froze. Matteo. My brother stood in the doorway, breathless, wearing a dark hoodie and tactical gear I'd never seen him in. He looked wild-eyed, sweating. Behind him, two of our family's soldiers stood guard. "We have to go, now," Matteo hissed, rushing forward to grab my wrist. "Lorenzo's men, they're coming to scrub the penthouse." "What? Lorenzo just left. He told me to wait." "He told you to wait so you'd be a sitting duck." Matteo dragged me toward the door. "He played us, Elena. He played all of us." I stumbled after him, confusion warring with instinct. "What are you talking about?" We were in the service elevator, descending rapidly. Matteo's grip was bruising. "Uncle Silvio," Matteo spat the name. "It wasn't a heart attack. It wasn't old age. Lorenzo poisoned him, years ago. He's been playing the long game to get the merger." My stomach dropped. That's insane. Lorenzo barely knew us back then. "He knew the assets," Matteo yelled, his voice echoing in the small metal box. "He killed Silvio, and tonight, once the merger is finalized at midnight, which it just was, electronically, he plans to kill you. A tragic accident. The grieving widower inherits the Rossi shipping lines and the Valentini territories. You're nothing but a signature to him." The elevator dinged. The basement garage was cold. Matteo shoved me into the back of a black SUV. "I'm getting you out of the city," he said, climbing into the driver's seat. "I'm the only one left who can protect you." As we tore out of the garage, tires squealing, I looked at the back of my brother's head. It made sense. The coldness, the calculated violence. Lorenzo was a killer. I had seen it tonight. But as we merged onto the highway, heading not toward the airport, but toward the desolate industrial docks, a cold shard of doubt pierced through me. Lorenzo had stood between me and a bullet 2 hours ago. If he wanted me dead, why save me from Vance? "Matteo," I said slowly, "why are we going to the docks?" "Boat," he said shortly. "Safer." "Lorenzo saved me tonight," I said, watching his eyes in the rearview mirror. "Vance tried to run us off the road. Lorenzo shielded me with his own body." Matteo's eyes twitched, part of the act. "No," I whispered. "No, it wasn't." I looked at the dashboard. The GPS wasn't set for the marina. It was set for the old Rossi warehouse, the place where Uncle Silvio used to conduct his interrogations. "You're lying," I said, my voice trembling. Matteo slammed on the brakes, swerving into the gravel lot of the abandoned warehouse district. The car skidded to a halt. He turned around, and the brotherly concern was gone. In its place was a sneer of pure resentment. "You always were the smart one, Elena. That was the problem. He pulled a gun. Get out. I stepped out into the misty night air. The warehouse loomed like a skeleton. Matteo marched me inside, the two soldiers staying by the car. Why? I asked, my voice echoing in the vast, empty space. Because the old man was going to give it all to you, Matteo screamed, the sound tearing through the silence. Silvio was going to bypass me. He said I was too volatile, too weak, so I removed him, and I made a deal with Vance to remove Lorenzo. But Lorenzo is harder to kill than a cockroach. You killed Uncle Silvio, I gasped. And now I'm going to kill you, Matteo said, raising the pistol. And I'll pin it on Lorenzo. I'll be the grieving brother who avenges his sister. I'll take the empire back. He cocked the hammer. I closed my eyes, not praying, but thinking of the man with the blood-stained hands. Wait for me, Elena. A deafening crack of thunder split the air, but it wasn't thunder. Matteo screamed, his gun clattering to the concrete as his hand exploded in a spray of red. You talk too much, Matteo. The voice came from the shadows, dark as death itself. Lorenzo stepped into the light, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt rolled up to reveal forearms tense with lethal intent. He held a silenced pistol with casual, terrifying ease. Lorenzo, I breathed. Matteo fell to his knees, clutching his mangled hand. How? You think I'd leave my wife without a tracker? Lorenzo walked forward, his steps echoing like the tolling of a funeral bell. And you think I didn't know you were the leak? I was waiting for you to make your move. Lorenzo didn't look at me. His focus was entirely on my brother. You sold your sister to Vance. You killed your own blood for money. She's nothing, Matteo spat, pain making him delirious. She's just a bargaining chip. Lorenzo stood over him. She is a queen, and you are a peasant who forgot his place. Lorenzo raised the gun. Wait, I shouted. Lorenzo paused, his finger hovering over the trigger. He looked at me then, his eyes burning with that dark fire. He tried to kill you, Elena. He betrayed you. I know, I said, my voice steadying. I walked over to them. I looked down at the brother I had grown up with, the boy who had once pushed me on the swings, now twisted by greed and envy. I reached out and placed my hand over Lorenzo's on the gun. He's mine to deal with, I said softly. Lorenzo watched me, assessing. Then he nodded slowly. Do what needs to be done. I looked at Matteo. He was sobbing now, begging. Please, we're family. Family doesn't sell family, I said, cold as ice. I didn't shoot him. I wasn't him. I looked at Lorenzo. Give him to the commission. Let everyone know what happens to traitors. Death is too easy. Let him lose everything first. Lorenzo's lips curved into a sharp, predatory smile. Merciless. I like it. He signaled to the shadows. 3 of his guards emerged. They had neutralized Matteo's men silently. They dragged my screaming brother away into the night. Finally, we were alone. The silence of the warehouse was heavy, but the fear was gone. Lorenzo holstered his weapon and turned to me. He examined my face, his thumb brushing a stray tear from my cheek. I told you the danger was localized, he murmured. I told you I was the dangerous one. You lied, I said, stepping closer, invading his space. You're not the danger to me, you're the shield. I am both tesoro. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me flush against him. The scent of gunpowder and expensive cologne filled my senses. I killed for you tonight. I will kill for you tomorrow. That is the vow I made, even if I didn't say it at the altar. And I whispered, reaching up to grip the back of his neck. I am done running. Does that mean you accept the terms? He asked, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating against my chest. No more separate rooms, no more walls. You belong to me, Elena. Body, soul, and empire. I thought about the man who had walked through fire for me. I thought about the power we held together. The Rosses and the Valentinis, united not just by paper, but by blood and survival. I don't belong to you, Lorenzo, I said, tilting my head back. His eyes narrowed dangerously. We belong to each other, I finished. Partners in crime and in everything else. Lorenzo let out a breath that sounded like a laugh, or perhaps relief. He crushed his mouth to mine, a kiss that tasted of iron and victory. It wasn't gentle. It was a seal on a contract written in blood. The war outside would continue. Vance was gone, Matteo was finished, but there would always be wolves at the door. But as Lorenzo lifted me into his arms, carrying me out of the darkness and toward the waiting car, I knew one thing for certain. We were the wolves, and tonight the hunt was over. "Let's go home, wife," he growled against my neck. "Take me home, husband," I replied. The car door slammed shut, sealing us in together. Bound by vows, bound by blood, and finally, bound by love. The end.